Let me tell you something that your spirit already suspects, a truth that lives beneath your fears. Walk with me for a few moments and you will feel it unfold inside you like a flower that has been waiting through winter's darkness for the gentlest touch of spring. There was a man who walked among the forgotten, who touched the untouchables, who spoke truths so radical that they shook the foundations of every institution that claimed to represent the divine. His name echoes through centuries not because of the temples built in his honor, but because of the revolution he carried in his heart. And in the 2,000 years since his footsteps blessed this earth, something beautiful and terrible has happened. The very people who built golden altars in his name learned to fear what he actually taught. You have felt this, haven't you? This quiet ache that rises when you read his words in the silence of your room and compare them to what echoes from marble pulpits and television screens. You have sensed that somewhere between the carpenter who ate with tax collectors and prostitutes and the jeweled statues that now represent him, something essential was lost. Something so powerful, so transformative, so threatening to the established order that it had to be carefully wrapped in doctrine and ceremony and tradition until its sharp edges could no longer cut through the comfortable sleep of those who profit from spiritual slumber. Your soul knows the difference between the man who touched lepers with his bare hands and the distant figure painted on stained glass windows. Your heart recognizes the chasm between the teacher who said, "The last shall be first," and the institutions that have made themselves first while claiming to speak in his name. This tension you feel is not doubt creeping into your faith. It is recognition awakening in your spirit. It is the part of you that remains untamed by religious convention, responding to the wildness that lived in him. You were not born to worship from a distance. You were born to embody up close. You were not created to follow rules about love. You were created to love without rules. And somewhere deep in the chambers of your heart, beneath all the layers of what you have been taught you should believe, lives the dangerous knowing that his true message was never meant to comfort the comfortable, but to disturb every soul into remembering who they really are. The real Jesus was not the pale, mild figure painted on stained glass windows, hands folded in eternal prayer, eyes cast heavenward in permanent submission. The real Jesus was a fire wrapped in human flesh, a revolution clothed in carpenter's garments, a force of nature that could not be contained by any institution precisely because he came to dissolve the very concept of separation between the sacred and the ordinary, between the divine and the human, between heaven and earth. He was dangerous because he taught that the kingdom of heaven was not a distant promise dangling like fruit beyond reach, but a present reality available to anyone willing to abandon the chains of fear and step into the terrifying freedom of unconditional love. He was dangerous because he showed that love was not sentiment to be rationed out on holidays and special occasions, but the most subversive force in creation, capable of transforming enemies into friends, strangers into family, moments of despair into doorways of hope. He was dangerous because he proved that ordinary human beings, fishermen and tax collectors, prostitutes and sinners, could become extraordinary vessels of divine compassion without the permission of those who claimed to hold the keys to salvation. He walked among the people not as a distant deity demanding worship, but as a brother revealing what was possible when a human heart remembered its connection to the infinite source of all love. You see, the greatest threat to any institution is not external opposition or organized rebellion. The greatest threat is the quiet revelation that what it guards so jealously was never meant to be guarded at all. The divine spark that Jesus came to kindle in human hearts was never intended to be contained within walls of marble and gold, never meant to be rationed out in measured doses to those deemed worthy by committees of men in elaborate robes. The fire he brought was meant to burn freely in every human heart, to transform every encounter into a sacred meeting, to turn every act of love into a prayer that needed no altar but sincerity, no temple but the space between one soul and another. When you truly encounter his teachings, stripped of centuries of institutional interpretation and theological complexity, you discover something that makes religious authorities uncomfortable across all traditions. You discover a man who had no patience for spiritual hierarchies, who saw through the performance of religious piety like sunlight sees through morning mist. He understood that the sacred could not be captured in buildings or books, but lived only in the flowing space between one heart and another, in the moment when fear dissolves and love becomes the only reality that matters. This Jesus did not come to start another religion. Heaven knows the world had enough of those already, enough systems of rules and regulations about who could approach the divine and how and when and through which intermediary. He came to end the very concept of separation between the human and the divine. He came to reveal that every human being was already a beloved child of the infinite, already connected to the source of all healing, already carrying within them everything they needed to love, like the divine loves. This Jesus did not establish a church. He revealed that every soul was already a sanctuary, every heart already an altar, every act of genuine love already a perfect prayer. The dangerous Jesus taught that forgiveness was not something to be earned through proper penance
or perfect behavior, but something that flowed as freely as water from a spring to anyone thirsty enough to receive it. He taught that love was not conditional upon worthiness or good behavior, but wildly abundant, recklessly generous, available to saints and sinners alike. He taught that the last would be first, not through some cosmic bookkeeping system that kept track of good deeds and bad ones, but because true greatness revealed itself in service to those whom society had abandoned, forgotten, written off as lost causes. This Jesus touched lepers not to prove his divine power, but to demonstrate that no human being was untouchable, that every soul mattered equally in the eyes of love. He ate with sinners not to reform them according to religious standards, but to show them that the table of grace had no requirements for admission except hunger for connection, thirst for belonging, willingness to believe that they were worthy of love simply because they existed. He forgave the woman caught in adultery, not because she promised to be perfect from that moment forward, but because he saw through her shame to the luminous being she had always been beneath her mistakes. And this is precisely why his true teachings had to be softened, systematized, made safe for institutional consumption and organized distribution. Because a world filled with people who truly believed they were already beloved, already worthy, already connected to the infinite source of love and wisdom and healing, would have no need for the spiritual merchants who promised to sell them what was already theirs by birthright. A world filled with people who understood that every stranger was their sibling, every enemy their teacher, every moment their chance to embody divine love, would transform so rapidly that the structures built on fear and scarcity and separation would crumble like sand castles before the incoming tide of grace. The church that grew in his name was not wrong to preserve his memory or to gather communities of people who wanted to follow his example. But somewhere in the preservation, the living fire became a museum piece under glass. The flowing river became a managed reservoir with carefully controlled distribution points. The wild song of liberation became a carefully orchestrated hymn that no longer called souls to revolution, but lulled them into spiritual complacency. The dangerous teachings that challenged every assumption about worth and love and belonging were replaced with comfortable doctrines that left the existing order undisturbed. The call to radical love was replaced with rules about who could love whom and how and under what circumstances such love would be deemed acceptable. What emerged was often a pale reflection of what he actually taught and embodied. Instead of the dangerous invitation to love without limit, institutions offered love with conditions. Instead of the revolutionary message that every human being was already worthy of divine love, they created systems that required people to earn their way into worthiness. Instead of the wild freedom he demonstrated, they offered controlled environments where spiritual experience could be managed, measured, and distributed by those who claimed authority over what belonged equally to all creation. You are not betraying faith when you hunger for something more real, more authentic, more alive than what many institutions offer. You are not lost when you feel that the Jesus of your heart speaks a different language than the Jesus of organizational Christianity. You are not confused when the love flowing through your spirit feels broader and more inclusive than what you hear from platforms and pulpits. You are awakening to what was always true, but carefully hidden beneath layers of interpretation and control. The most sacred thing about his message was not that it was unique to him, not that it set him apart from all humanity, but that it revealed what was possible for everyone willing to embrace the terrifying freedom of unconditional love. This is the secret that makes religious authorities uncomfortable across all traditions and throughout all centuries. Not that divine love exists, but that it needs no mediator to reach human hearts. Not that transformation is possible, but that it requires no membership fee or institutional approval. Not that the sacred is real, but that it cannot be owned, controlled, packaged, or distributed by anyone who claims special access to what belongs to all creation equally. The moment you realize that the love flowing through your heart is the same love that flowed through his, everything changes. The moment you understand that the divine presence some call God moves freely through every heart that opens to receive it, the artificial barriers between sacred and secular, spiritual and ordinary, divine and human begin to dissolve. When you let yourself feel the full impact of his actual teachings, when you allow his words to penetrate beneath the surface of familiarity to the revolutionary core beneath, something shifts inside you that no institution can govern or control. You begin to treat every person as though they carry the same divine spark you do, because they do. You begin to see through the illusions of hierarchy and status that keep souls separated from their own magnificence. You begin to trust the love that moves within you as the same force that moved within him, because it is. You begin to understand that serving others is not a religious obligation, but the natural expression of a heart that remembers its connection to all life. The dangerous Jesus revealed that every human being was already everything they needed to be to love, like the divine loves. Every person walking this earth already carried within them the capacity to heal what seemed broken, to transform what appeared impossible, to love what seemed unlovable. This revelation threatens every system built on the premise that some people
are more worthy than others, that divine love must be earned rather than received, that spiritual truth belongs to the few rather than flowing freely to all who are thirsty for meaning and connection and purpose. But here is where his teaching becomes truly revolutionary, where it moves beyond comfort into territory that makes comfortable people very uncomfortable indeed. He taught that this divine nature was not something to be worshipped from a distance, but something to be embodied in daily life. He demonstrated that the power to heal, to forgive, to love unconditionally was not his unique possession, but the birthright of every soul willing to release their grip on fear and step into their true identity as children of love itself. And then you understand that what you feared was never your enemy. It was the doorway asking to be opened. The discomfort you feel when institutional teachings contradict the love flowing naturally through your heart is not doubt or spiritual weakness. It is recognition. It is your soul's innate wisdom distinguishing between the religion about Jesus and the religion of Jesus, between the systems built around his memory and the living reality he came to awaken in every heart. Your heart knows the difference between worship that elevates him above you and beyond you, and teachings that elevate the divine nature within you and around you. The real Jesus was dangerous because he taught that you do not need anyone's permission to love completely, forgive freely, serve joyfully, and treat every moment as a chance to embody the sacred. He was dangerous because he showed that ordinary people, people just like you, could become extraordinary conduits of healing and hope simply by choosing love over fear in each encounter, connection over separation in each relationship, service over selfishness in each opportunity to make a difference. He was dangerous because he proved that the kingdom of heaven was not a future destination requiring proper credentials for admission, but a present choice available to anyone willing to see with eyes of compassion and act with hands of love. This is why his true teachings had to be contained, controlled, made safe for institutions that needed to maintain their role as intermediaries between souls and the divine. Because if people truly understood that they already carried within them everything they needed to love like he loved, to heal like he healed, to forgive like he forgave, then the spiritual marketplace that sold access to what was freely given would collapse overnight. If people truly grasped that the divine presence was not distant but intimate, not exclusive but inclusive, not rationed but abundant, then the artificial scarcity that made religious authority profitable would disappear like morning mist before the rising sun. You do not dishonor his memory when you refuse to limit his teachings to the boundaries others have drawn around them. You honor him most deeply when you let
his example give you permission to love as radically, serve as humbly, trust as completely, and forgive as freely as he did. You follow him most faithfully, not by worshiping his uniqueness from a safe distance, but by embracing your own potential to become a vessel of the same unconditional love he embodied. You serve his mission most truly when you allow the love that transformed the world through him to transform the world through you. The dangerous truth that institutions have spent centuries trying to soften is that the power he demonstrated was never meant to remain unique to him. It was meant to awaken in every soul willing to believe that love is stronger than fear, that connection is deeper than separation, that forgiveness is more powerful than revenge, that service is more fulfilling than selfishness. The miracles he performed were not displays of his divine nature separate from yours, but demonstrations of what becomes possible when a human heart remembers its true identity as a child of love itself. This is why his true teachings had to be contained, wrapped in doctrine, made safe for institutional distribution, because the full truth of what he taught and demonstrated would unleash such a flood of love and healing and transformation in the world that every structure built on fear and control and separation would be swept away by the tsunami of grace. The dangerous Jesus taught that you are not too small to carry this flame of love. You are not too broken to become a healer. You are not too ordinary for extraordinary love to move through you into a world that desperately needs what you have been given to share. But no institution can contain what was never meant to be contained. No doctrine can capture what was always meant to flow freely. No authority can govern what belongs to the infinite source of love itself. The dangerous Jesus lives not in buildings of stone and glass, but in every heart that chooses to love without condition, serve without recognition, forgive without limit, and treat every soul as sacred simply because they exist. He rises again, not on religious holidays, but in every moment when someone chooses compassion over judgment, connection over isolation, hope over despair. The same Spirit that moved through him moves through you when you choose love over judgment in your daily encounters. It moves through you when you choose connection over separation in your relationships. It moves through you when you choose service over selfishness in your decisions. It moves through you when you choose forgiveness over resentment in your heart. This is not blasphemy or spiritual arrogance. This is the point. This was always the point. He came not to be worshipped as the exception, but to awaken us all to the rule of divine love that lives within every human heart, waiting to be released. The dangerous Jesus was dangerous because he revealed that every human being was already everything they needed to be to love like the divine, loves to heal like the divine heals, to forgive like the divine forgives. He was dangerous because he taught that the sacred was not distant but intimate, not exclusive but inclusive, not rationed but abundant, not earned but given, not achieved but received. He was dangerous because he showed that transformation was not a future promise, but a present possibility for anyone willing to release their grip on who they thought they had to be and embrace who they had always been beneath their fears. When you live from this understanding, when you allow this truth to permeate your consciousness and guide your choices, you become dangerous too. Dangerous to every system built on the premise that some people matter less than others. Dangerous to every institution that profits from spiritual hunger rather than spiritual satisfaction. Dangerous to every authority that claims to stand between you and the love that is your birthright. Dangerous to every voice that tells you that you are not enough, not worthy, not capable of the kind of love that transforms everything it touches. You become dangerous because you embody the truth that love needs no permission from external authorities, compassion requires no credentials from institutional bodies, and the divine presence that some call God moves freely through every heart that opens to receive it. You become dangerous because you demonstrate that healing happens not through elaborate rituals, but through simple presence, that forgiveness flows not through complex theologies, but through open hearts, that transformation occurs not through perfect doctrine, but through imperfect love perfectly given. This is your invitation, not to join another institution or follow another set of rules or subscribe to another systematic theology, but to become so filled with the love that moved through him that it spills over into every relationship, every interaction, every moment of your ordinary, extraordinary life. Not to worship from a distance, but to embody up close. Not to wait for permission from those who claim authority over what belongs to all creation, but to begin today right where you are with whoever is in front of you, to love the way the dangerous Jesus loved. Your life becomes a prayer when you love without condition. Your work becomes worship when you serve without recognition. Your relationships become sacraments when you forgive without limit. Your very existence becomes a temple when you treat every soul as sacred simply because they exist. This is not a religious obligation imposed from outside. This is the natural expression of a heart that has remembered its true nature as a vessel of divine love. The dangerous Jesus did not teach you to follow him in the sense of walking behind him at a respectful distance. He taught you to follow him in the sense of going where he went, doing what he did, loving as he loved. He did not ask you to worship his uniqueness, but to embrace your own potential to become a conduit of the same unconditional love that flowed through him into a world that needed healing. He did not establish himself as the permanent intermediary between you and the divine, but revealed that no intermediary was needed because the divine was already closer to you than your own breath. You carry within you the same capacity for radical love that moved through him. You possess the same ability to see the divine in the despised, to find the sacred in the seemingly secular, to transform ordinary moments into extraordinary opportunities for grace. This is not religious fantasy or spiritual wishful thinking. This is the most practical reality in creation. Love is not weakness, but the strongest force in existence. Compassion is not sentiment, but the most powerful tool for transformation. Forgiveness is not naive, but the most sophisticated response to a world trapped in cycles of hurt and revenge. When you choose to love the difficult person in your life, you are following the dangerous Jesus who ate with tax collectors and sinners. When you offer forgiveness to someone who has wounded you, you are walking the path he walked when he asked forgiveness for those who crucified him. When you serve someone who cannot repay you, you are embodying the spirit that moved through him when he washed his disciples' feet. When you speak truth to power, regardless of the personal cost, you are channeling the same courage that led him to overturn the tables of those who had turned his Father's house into a marketplace. This is how the dangerous Jesus lives again in every generation, not through religious institutions that bear his name, but often miss his heart, not through theological systems that explain him, but fail to embody him, not through elaborate ceremonies that honor his memory, but ignore his mission. He lives again through ordinary people who choose extraordinary love in their daily encounters with a world that has forgotten how to hope. The revolution he started was never meant to end with his death or be contained within the walls of churches or limited to the confines of religious holidays. It was meant to continue through every soul brave enough to believe that love really can transform enemies into friends, that forgiveness really can break cycles of hurt, that compassion really can heal what seems beyond healing. It was meant to spread through the simple, radical act of treating every person you encounter as though they carry the same divine spark that burns within you, because they do. You do not need to wait for permission from religious authorities to begin living this way. You do not need special training or theological degrees to start loving like he loved. You do not need ordination or institutional approval to begin serving others as though their well-being mattered as much as your own. You need only the willingness to step into the truth he demonstrated, that every human being is worthy of love simply because they exist, that
every moment is an opportunity to choose connection over separation, that every day offers countless chances to embody the divine love that flows through all creation like a river seeking the sea. The dangerous Jesus knew that his life would speak louder than his words, that his example would teach more powerfully than his explanations. He knew that love demonstrated would be more convincing than love preached. This is why he touched the untouchables, embraced the outcasts, forgave the unforgivable, not to prove his divine nature, but to awaken the divine nature that slept within everyone who witnessed his radical compassion. He was showing you what you could become when fear no longer governed your choices, when love became the lens through which you saw every person and every situation. The path he walked is still open. The love he demonstrated is still available. The transformation he offered is still possible, not through religious performance or spiritual striving, but through the simple choice to love without condition, serve without recognition, forgive without limit. This is the revolution that changes the world one heart at a time, one relationship at a time, one act of radical love at a time. The dawn waits for no one, but welcomes all who rise. The love that transformed the world through him waits to transform the world through you, not someday when you have become worthy enough. Now exactly as you are, not somewhere else when you have found the right place. Here, right where you stand, not through someone else who has special credentials. Through you, with your unique gifts and your particular way of loving and your specific capacity to heal what seems broken in this beautiful, wounded world. If this spoke to your spirit, write in the comments, "I am awakening now."